Welcome to this week's Ask EMBN. I'm joined by Henry from GMBN Tech. This man is a wizard, spent a few years on the World Cup circuit, mechanicking and wrenching for the world's best. So, fountain of knowledge.
No pressure.
This guy. No, exactly. Anyway, loads of questions this week coming in from you guys, so let's get into it.
First, we have a question from Lidio Faria, and he says, what's the best option to transport my e-bike on my car?
So on my car, we're not talking, so you're not able to put your e-bike inside your car, like take the front wheel out, stick it in the boot, something like that. You want to do it on the car.
Yeah, well, that'd be my weapon. I prefer to have the bike in the car with me.
Exactly, yeah. It's definitely a lot safer. You're not going to get all your wheels contaminated and water getting into the electrics and stuff. So that'd be my favourite option, obviously a van or an estate car.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go onto the bike, we're talking racks. So you can have either a tow bar mounted rack. All of these have to be like e-bike specific as well. Like if you try and stick like a heavy e-bike or a couple of e-bikes on a standard bike rack, it's literally going to snap off.
Oh dear. Yeah, I imagine it would, yeah.
And a lot of the roof mounted ones are generally sort of rated to about 25 kilos as well. So again, the roof bar mounted ones, if you want to save a little bit of weight, you can obviously take the battery out, and some of the models you can remove your front wheel. So you're going to save sort of 2 or 3 kilos that way. That should bring you down below that weight limit. But so yeah, roof racks, tow hitch, mounted racks as well. It's going to be your best options, I think, for that.
I guess my concern, even with normal bikes, is that when you see people with bike racks on top, on the back of their car, it's in the rain and they're blasting down the motorway, I often think they're basically pressure washing their bike with gritty water.
Yeah, definitely.
Is maybe that concern even more so with an e-bike? If you did have to take the battery out to get it on a roof rack, to get it under the lid and all your
exposed metal contacts and stuff. Yeah, so if you are putting it on there, I would suggest getting a like a cover. I think like Thule do one with like basically a big drawstring underneath. You can literally put over the whole lot, whip it up tight. As Henry mentioned, you're not going to be driving the water into the electrics, and you're not going to risk the contamination off the road as well, all the salt and the oil from your fumes from your exhaust and things like that, contaminated things like disc rotors, rust in your chains. So yeah, bike racks, but make sure they're definitely e-bike specific, totally. Otherwise you might be picking up your bikes a few miles back down the road.
Yeah, that's it. Next we have a question from Bass Guitar Hangout, and they say, I got my first flat on my high bike last night.
Yeah.
Breaking the steel on my tubeless tyre to put the tube in was a job for Hercules. I had to stand on the tyre and pull the wheel off the tyre. Is there an easier way?
Well, I'm sure you've changed plenty of tyres in your...
Yeah. I mean, sometimes we used to super glue them onto the rim.
Really?
And then getting them off.
Was that a challenge or just a tip?
Oh, I mean, it's probably just to say, you know, with a bit of human endeavour, it can be done.
Yeah.
The best way to do it, I find, is...
So we're talking tubed or tubeless?
Either. If it's really stubborn on there, sometimes the sealant could possibly congeal to kind of, you know, feel form something like an adhesive.
Yeah.
Is really just get your fingers low to the bead and your thumbs on the other side, and you're not necessarily pulling it across, but you're pulling it over.
Yeah.
You know, and then once you get that bit, if you push that bit into the well, and you can just work it around.
Yeah, I think the basic thing for tyre removal is to try and do it in little tiny steps. You try and get, even with tyre levers, if you put like one in at sort of 12 o'clock and your next one in at sort of 2 o'clock and try and lever that whole thing off, you just got to work out in like little tiny sized chunks. And a decent set of tyre levers can save you your thumbs as well. I think pretty much all the tubeless tyres are definitely a lot tighter than a standard like tube tyre, so you just got to be aware of that. And I think a decent set of tyre levers is going to make yourself a lot easier with Henry's technique as well if you do get stuck without them. But we've done a video all about fitting stubborn tyres. Check this one out.
So what you're trying to do here is get as much space between the bead, as I mentioned, the bead is the wire outer edge of the tyre, as possible. So I'd actually spend a second or two working some space up into that top end where you're going to start taking it off. So if you can get like 5 mil there, it's going to help you get that lever in there.
Next we have a question from Charles Stenner, and he says, when you are filming on the trails, do you close the trails so no one can come behind you? Now, you probably have a bit more experience of this myself,
Yeah,
Chris.
it's a good question. Yeah, sometimes if we are filming like uphill climb sections on which is essentially a downhill trail, we'll speak to the trail centre guys just to make sure we can actually close that trail and sometimes ride it backwards for those sort of videos. But generally, we're quite experienced between us that we can choose a section of trail. We're not going to be obstructing it, always listening out for riders. We tend to go there in the week when it's a lot quieter, so we're not there at peak times. And just choosing sections really and just keeping an eye out at all times. I don't know
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the bits of filming I've done for the channel on trail, it's always about, you know, we want to replicate the viewer's experience.
Yeah.
And so that sometimes means that although on one location, say the Forest of Dean, we are riding multiple trails to best exaggerate, you know, what we're talking about or showcase it. So it does take a little bit of planning. You know, like you said, the timing is really important. Yeah. But often if we ever need to, you know, push up a trail to maybe reshoot a section, a lot of care is taken.
Yeah.
And especially if we're, you know, coming on the trail, we've also essentially in the cameraman got a sighter.
Yeah.
Who's looking, you know, down the trail. And we would never start, you know, on a blind quest or anything like that.
No.
That location is really taken into account.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I believe it's called a dynamic risk assessment.
That's right.
For the
all about that.
For the fans of the old risk assessment. I'm sure they're out there. And yeah, no, we do take great care. So
definitely.
Bit of practice and you can do it.
Yeah.
Next, we have a question from Jay Houghton. They say, fix any flat was a great video.
Cool, thank you.
But a quick question regarding the CO2 inflator.
Yeah.
Is it true that the CO2 will leak through the tyre overnight, so you'll need to top that up with a track pump the next day?
Sounds like a question for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's something that is important to address.
Yeah.
There is plenty of air that will walk in and out of your tyre as it pleases.
Right.
When you leave it overnight, whether it's just drawn entirely from the atmosphere, whether it's nitrogen, you get it when you use latex inner tubes and kind of performance road bikes.
Right.
In that scenario, when they're using tubular tyres, on long stage races, sometimes they can't use, or they have to top up, you know, basically have to be wary that if they race for 8 hours, the tyre will have sufficiently lost enough pressure through the sidewalls that it'll be too low at the end.
Really?
Yeah, so it is a thought.
Yeah.
It probably happens a little bit more with CO2,
Right.
but I would say that you should be checking your tyre pressures anyway.
Yeah, before
regardless.
every ride. Yeah, especially after repair as well, I think.
Yeah,
it's
totally.
really important.
I always check my tyre pressures, and without sounding like too much of a nerd going into it, you know, you're saying that the amount that you're going to lose due to the being CO2 as opposed to just naturally aspirated from the environment is probably similar to, I would pose the same thing and say, well, if we're going to go down that route in terms of that scientific, let's look at heat, the effects that's going to have on your pressure, which is enormous. Let's look at elevation.
Yeah.
Are you checking your pressure at the same height? If you do it, if you do the pressure high up on the lift, you know, this is stuff we'd always have to take into account racing.
Yeah.
And so those sort of things, you know, it's just another variable, but it's quite small.
That's
just
pretty
take your pressures
interesting.
as you are. The big thing is don't leave your tyres in a roasting hot car, for instance, and then check them when you literally feel the tyre being warm.
Really?
Because when you get on the trail and say the tyre cools down a bit,
Difference.
it will be lower, significantly lower, maybe 2 or 3 psi.
Wow.
Next, we have a question from Sebastian Riverin. And he says, I have a common style meter power with a Shimano Steps E8000 and a 504 watt-hour battery.
Right.
Where can I find a bigger battery?
Well, unfortunately, that bike has the external battery, so you're quite fixed to that style of battery, and it is only available in 504 watt hours. So your best option is going to be, if you can afford it, is to get a second battery for that bike and just literally stick one in your backpack, ride, swap it over, then you can have over 1,000 watt hours of power to play with. You can stretch some big mileage out of these batteries. I've done 100k on one battery, but that was just riding an eco.
Yeah.
But yeah, way more fun. I did 100k the fun way as well with 2 batteries.
Fair.
That is the best way to do it, I'm afraid. But yeah, check out 100k the fun way. So in my bag, I've obviously got a spare battery that's fully charged, ready to go on my e-bike when it runs out of power. But if you are riding with a spare battery, you also need to think about the backpack that you run in. Make sure it's got a back protector in there, because if you crash with a battery in a normal backpack, you're going to land on it. It's probably going to cause you big damage to your spine. So make sure it's got that on there.
Next, we have a question from Mark Byrne, and he says, I got myself a 2018 Levo.
Nice.
Would you be able to do a video on how to wash your e-bike, please? Now, I think I can answer this one pretty good.
Yep.
You cover it in a bit of fairy washing up liquid, you tie a rope to it, and you chuck it in the canal, then you just pull it back.
Maybe
Tried and tested.
Maybe for your
Absolutely.
manual mountain bikes, but e-bikes are a little bit more
Oh, really?
special.
Well, it never fails me wrong, mate. I don't like to do it in seas, sometimes the salt, but a canal, absolutely fine, yeah.
Fresh water, right?
Yeah.
No, I think with the e-bike, it's pretty similar to a standard mountain bike, really. You just got to take a little bit of extra care around, obviously, the battery, the motor, and the switch unit itself. If you are using a pressure washer, as a lot of people do, you just need to do it from quite a distance away. A lot of people, well, the manufacturers say not to use a power washer, but it is the easiest way of washing a bike. Just be super careful Well, I just basically power wash the normal parts of my bike, front and back wheels and forks and things like that, and then just go steady with it. Just turn it either off, so you've got like a standard hose for the motor and the battery, things like that. But I think the most prone part of your e-bike is actually the switch unit and the power control.
Yep.
So if you mode thing, just go really steady on that. Just use a damp cloth for all those parts that you're not going to be blasting water into. Just be careful around all the switches and stuff.
Yeah, I would say if you are, maybe you don't have a power washer or, maybe not even have a hose pipe, you can wash your bike using 2 buckets, one for clean water and one for water that's going to get dirty, and just a water bottle. If you agitate the dirt on the surface, you'd be surprised you can get most stuff off using just basically your bottle as a pressure washer.
Oh, nice.
And that is sufficient to get it clean once you agitate the dirt with a brush, whilst probably not enough pressure. It's probably a little more than rainwater, really.
That's pretty good.
So that's kind of a cheap way to do it at home.
Portable power washer, eh?
Portable power washer, yeah.
Nice.
Next, we have a question from Phil Rogers. He says, I ride a high bike X-Duro all-mountain 6.0. Nice. I would love to take my dog along, and a trailer seems to be the best option.
Right.
Can you recommend anyone that will fit my axle? Surely you'd be employing the dog like a chariot husky. Just watch out,
isn't it? Yeah, put it the other way around.
Yeah.
But so your axle on your e-bike's going to be 12 by 148, and I had a quick Google around, and I see that Burley actually do an axle conversion. So you've got your standard through axle that you put in, and then it's got a nut that's housed with a female thread, so you can actually attach a trailer to it. I think Thule do them as well. So just have a quick Google around, and then obviously the trailer options. I'm not too hot on my dog trailers, but what do you think about dog trailers? You got any?
Yeah, I mean, just give the dog some luxury. Treat it like you would a child, I guess.
Sheepskin wool in there.
Oh, yeah.
Sit him in there.
I'd go the full hog. I'd put, pictures of like Lassie up, make it really homely. Maybe some Welsh countryside.
Sounds good.
Beautiful.
But yeah, a couple of options there. But for Thule and Burley do the axle you're going to need for your e-bike, 12 by 148, and then obviously the trailer down to you.
Perfect. Next, we have a question from Robert Magro, and he says, hi, I have an Eagle 12-speed drivetrain on my e-bike. Nice. What is the best chain, because I need a new one?
Well, it's funny enough, we had this question a couple of shows back. 12-speed e-bike rated chains are quite rare, to be fair. And the only option I could find that was e-bike rated was the actual SRAM Eagle chains themselves. I think the SRAM Eagle NX is the cheapest option, but I would try and keep it all SRAM because it works, doesn't it? In unison, pretty good, all that stuff. So I
saw Eurobike. KMC did indeed have a 12-speed e-bike rated chain, and with the e-bikes, because that higher torque, essentially the chassis of the chain, if you like, is stiffer.
Right.
So you will get better performance. You're seeing a lot on downhill bikes now because they're grabbing gears at the start gate.
Yeah.
Having that stiffer chain stops it pranging, and it's like basically just. It bends less, basically.
So it's got bigger shift plates, hasn't it? And the pins are bigger on the e-bike stuff.
It's
so
a bit more
it does make
burly,
a difference.
so
yeah,
it would make a difference.
Yeah, so maybe SRAM, or as Henry says, a KMC one is worth a look as well. So check those ones out.
Next, we have a question from John Herbert, the famous Formula 1 racing driver. He knows some stuff about powering the drivetrains, I bet.
Sure.
And he says, how do I send a photo in for the bike vault?
Well, we get loads of photos and videos sent in to us, and a lot of you guys send them in via social media, like Facebook, and some people on Instagram, things like that, but that's not the way we do it. We like you guys to use the upload service, and that way we get all those photos and videos and stories. It makes us all in one place, and we can use that for the show and ask, things like that, and the details for that are on screen now. But that's it for this week's Ask EMBN. Thank you guys for sending in your questions. If you guys want to get featured on next week's show, hashtag Ask EMBN. Drop us it in the comments box below. Your question could be you on next week's show.
Yeah, now if you want to stick with the channel, check out that video we did on how to wash your e-bike.
Yeah.
It's worth checking out. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you want to keep up to date with the content, hit that little notifications bell. You won't regret it. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
and we'll see you next time.
Week. Cheers.